Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, hopefully having an amazing day. There have been a couple of very interesting leaks which have popped up for both Zen 5 and Zen 6. These really detail some of the major architectural shifts that AMD will be incorporating in both sets of architectures. Basically, it's fair to say that Zen 5 is a massive departure to what we had previously, and really Zen 6 is setting up a whole different precedent of what we can imagine CPUs in the future from AMD to be. We're going to get into that in a moment though, because I want to start the video out with some updates concerning Nvidia's Blackwell series of graphics cards for gamers, aka RTX 50. Yesterday I went over a fairly extensive leak detailing many of the key specifications that we can expect from the flagship products, and I've since heard back from a source or two, so I want to give you guys some updates after this message from the video's sponsor. This Halloween is a perfect chance to save even more money off of your Windows 10 or 11 keys at whokeys.com, today's video's sponsor. Not only are Whokeys offering huge discounts off of a range of CD keys, including of course Windows, but you can get an extra 25% off using the code RGT. You can find Windows 10, 11, as well as various Microsoft Office packages, or if you're a budding developer, even Visual Studios. And of course, it goes without saying, there's a large library of games, all at reduced prices. You can use our code RGT to get a huge discount on this entire range of software. I have personally tested the purchase experience using their own personal account, and I've also had various friends try it out as well, and the whole process has been very simple. Just navigate to the product you want to buy, click buy now, and you'll be led straight to the basket where you can add a discount code, again RGT, for a further 25% off of the hugely reduced Halloween sale price, and then of course it will be sent straight to you. Thanks again to whokeys.com for sponsoring today's video. So to get us all on the same page, if you know this bit, you can skip forward a couple of minutes. And again, you can check out yesterday's video if you want a more extensive overview. Coppertight7 Kimmy on Twitter basically stated that GB202 is going to have a configuration of 12 by 8. So this essentially means that the highest end configuration possible would be 192 SMs. Now, of course, that would be the fully enabled die. So for example, an RTX 5090 would probably have a certain number of SMs disabled. For example, we could see like 170-ish, 180-ish SMs, depending on how deep Nvidia wishes to cut down the GPU. And again, because we know that RDNA 4's flagship products are essentially cancelled, I think it's most likely that Nvidia will hold back some of the highest end products or maybe do a refresh, but that's speculative. I honestly do not know. Keeping with what Coppertight7 stated, he also mentions that a 512-bit bus is going to be likely again for GB202, so obviously you can kind of work down the list for lower end products. Now, I reached out to a couple of sources late last night, and basically one or two of them have come back and essentially told me the following. The SM number, from what they understand, is correct. However, again, there are multiple designs in consideration, so it's possible that this number could change because, again, Nvidia can change the stuff on a dime. So it's very possible that Nvidia may change this, but it does seem quite likely. I also spoke to Coppertight7 in DM, and I won't go over the entire conversation, but the long story short, there is a couple of questions that we are both left with. One of the big problems, and this is also some issues that even my sources are having as well, is that there are some changes between the gaming variants and also the variants, of course, which go into servers. Now, there are some obvious ones. For example, GB100, the highest end variant, is going to be chiplet, whereas the gaming highest end is not. It's going to be monolithic. And of course, again, the data center variant is also going to be HBM based, and so on and so on. But there are some also architectural changes as well. So it becomes quite difficult, for example, to know precisely what has changed between the gaming variant and the data center variant. For example, one thing I was told is that there's a new bus structure in place. It was like Hyperbus or something like that, but I do not know whether that is for the data center variant or whether that's for the gaming or whether it's for both. One thing I can say is that one of the most persistent rumors that I've heard, and again I was speaking to Coppertite a little bit about this, is that there seems to be some major revisions and changes to the SMs themselves, the SM structure. But again, what exactly has changed becomes so much more complicated due to the nature of, well, basically two variants. It's really quite confusing at the moment. One source is essentially telling me that it's somewhat Volta based, but that may not be 100% true as well, because Coppertite is saying that it's possibly based on Hopper. So again, it's kind of up in the air at the moment. So it's going to be very interesting to see what Nvidia does. I am very much looking forward, however, to seeing what type of performance update. I've heard so many different performance numbers touted. And of course, again, there are a lot of questions, because you can say, well, when it comes to performance, how are you even quantifying that? What measurement? Are we talking like, compute? Are we talking tensor cores? Are we talking average frame rate at 4K with raster? Are we talking average frame rate with ray tracing, path tracing, DLSS 5.3 or whatever the hell ends up releasing at that time? Obviously, I'm just kind of spitballing here, but you get the idea. Like, how are they actually talking about those performance advantages? Speaking of which, so Moore's Law is Dead has actually leaked a couple of very interesting slides, and I won't go over all of the slides, but I will of course leave a link to his video in the description. Now, what's quite interesting about this is that I won't go over the older architectures, like for example Persephone/Durango here, because, well, that's pretty established. Now, one thing you'll notice is that the actual dates here are no longer relevant, and I was speaking to some people and they basically have told me that these slides are probably pretty old. They do, however, seem to be legitimate. However, they do seem to be a little bit old. Now, based upon what I was told, and I've mentioned this in several slides, a couple of things here seem quite true. FP512 seems quite correct. I was also told that the dispatch/decoders seem wider. The ALU stuff as well, from what I've heard, is probably correct as well. So I believe he is 100% on that. The 16-core complex, again, I've leaked that. So I believe that that is correct. The major thing I'm not certain about here comes down to the IPC. Now, one source has straight up told me that it's probably based upon older information, or there was sandbagging. However, I'm not necessarily inclined to believe that. A couple of sources prior to this in some of my videos, I've basically said that I was hearing up to 30%, but I was getting a lot of different numbers. I was hearing like high teens up to like 30% as an average. However, some numbers were absolutely insane, like over 50%. Basically, I was just given, I'm just going to say it, a shit ton of different numbers, leaving me really with a lot of questions of like, what's fake, what's true, or is it just based upon different workloads? A really good source essentially told me that the information here, because notice it does say plus, it's apparently, from again what I'm told, this number is for a very specific data/HPC workload. Now, I don't want to get on the hopium train. I've said before, while I have heard up to 30%, I think, I'm personally saying high teens to low 20% as an average, even though a couple of sources who have been really dead on before, they are pretty damn insistent that it's higher than that. But it's so difficult to know. One thing I'll also say about my brain has gone dead here, Zen 6, is that, again, this matches up what I've heard, like the IPC gains are much smaller, but it becomes quite complicated because Zen 6, there's a lot of weirdness, because AMD's AM5 platform, from what I understand, Zen 5 has the exact same IOD, whereas, so basically it's the same as Ryzen 7000. I don't want to say you could just like, solder one to the other, because obviously that's not exactly practical, but you get the idea. They're basically the same thing. However, with Zen 6, which I presume will be Ryzen 9000, the IOD is allegedly quite different. And I'm hearing a lot of really mixed things. Some folks are saying that Zen 6 has Zen 6C for the Ryzen processors for desktop, and that basically speaking, the IOD is essentially a parity between mobile and desktop. Honestly, there's a lot of confusing stuff. My personal opinion is that Zen 5 is going to be really freaking good. I genuinely think it's going to be an absolutely amazing architecture. Someone has actually told me that in gaming workloads, so obviously this is for Ryzen, it seems that Ryzen 8000 vanilla, so that's not the X3D variant, is basically stomping over the Zen 4 X3D variants in gaming workloads. So I'm going to be very interested to see exactly what this can actually achieve. Like, it's really interesting. I've also heard, and there have been other reports as well on the cache changes. Unfortunately, one of the big things that's a little bit of a shame is it doesn't go too much into the L3 changes. It does, reiterate this 1 megabyte of L2 for, the caches here, which I think is correct. Jim over at Adore TV did state that there were other variants as well. There were some variants that were being, or should I say, there was some tests internally at AMD. There were never variants that were, ready for launch or anything, that had I think it was 1, 2, and 3 megabyte L2s that were being tested internally, and the IPC gains were really small. I think it was 4 and 7% respective of the size over the 1 megabyte. So I think, personally speaking, it's going to be really interesting to see exactly what Zen 5 can do. At the moment, if I had to give the nod, I would probably say it's going to be Arrow Lake. But who knows? We'll have to wait and see. Honestly, I'm just hyped. I genuinely think it's going to be a really interesting architecture. For Ryzen 9000, I've heard that it may not be on AM5, but there's some apparently internal fighting concerning that. It may be on a different platform, but maybe there's a specific reason for that. For example, they want to change something on the memory configuration. Maybe they feel like it needs more memory bandwidth to feed it. Who the hell knows? It's quite up in the air at the moment. I have been hearing through the grapevine that there are some major plan shifts at AMD. I don't want to say too much on that yet, because the info I've had is really contradictory, as this stuff tends to be early on. But basically, there seems to be some major changes internally. So, we'll have to wait and see. I will be very curious, though, to see what happens with AMD going forward. I think it's going to be a very interesting couple of generations of hardware, especially as we know, because Microsoft, as well as Sony, almost certainly, from what I understand, Microsoft are dead shoo-in, of course, for AMD, and from everything I've heard anyway, PlayStation 6 is definitely using AMD hardware again. So Sony and Microsoft, it's exactly the same thing. I don't think anyone really thought to themselves, well, gee, PlayStation 6 is going to go, Nvidia or something like that, because it's not just the technology you've got to take into consideration. There's all of the backwards compatibility crap, the ability to customize stuff. There's a lot of work. So I'll be very interested to see how all of this plays out. With that said, guys, take care of yourselves. Have an amazing day. Bye for now.